Why do people listen to classical music? 8% of German concertgoers express as motivation for visiting classical concerts that it's simply part of good taste. When dealing with the aspect of taste, it is worthwhile to look at the work of Pierre Bourdieu. He was one of the most influential sociologists of the 20th century. He developed the concept of social powers. Basically, this concept states that the social standing of a person can be described by 4 different forms of capital: cultural capital, economic capital, social capital, and symbolic capital. Taste is to a certain extent involved in all of them. In one of his essential works, Distinction, a social critique of the judgment of taste, Bourdieu writes, "Taste is first and foremost distaste, disgust, and visceral intolerance of the taste of others." Taste is distaste of the taste of others. This implies that taste is used to differentiate oneself from others. How can this distinction be performed? This is where Bourdieu's social powers come into play. Let's start with cultural capital. This form of social power has 3 different substates. Firstly, cultural capital can be embodied. This state refers to inherent characteristics of an individual which indicate a certain level of cultural expertise. Prominent examples of these inherent characteristics are appearance, education, or diction. Imagine a prototype classical concertgoer. Aren't there distinct facets of clothing, language, and behavior? Maybe less intuitive is the second state of cultural capital, the objectified state. This state refers to cultural goods, for example, works of art, instruments, or books. However, the access to these goods is not enough. The owner must also understand the cultural goods and see meaning in them. Finally, cultural capital can be institutionalized. This third state refers to formal titles such as degrees and certificates. Such documents indicate that an individual has a certain expertise or skill set. How can an individual build these forms of cultural capital? An important way to build cultural capital relates to the second form of Bourdieu's social powers, economic capital. Economic capital refers to material goods that an individual owns, most prominently money. But it also comprises companies, land, resources, patents, works of art, and so on. Economic capital is often required to obtain cultural capital. Education, for example, can be really expensive. But the reverse is true too. Cultural capital can pave the way for economic capital. Just think of someone engaging in the arts. Perhaps this process sparks creative ideas with economic potential. The third form of Bourdieu's social powers is called social capital. Social capital comprises resources which an individual has due to a certain group membership. In other words, privileges through good connections. Such group membership can build access to cultural capital. You can learn a lot about the arts if you can talk to experts. Also, access and enthusiasm are often sparked by the passion of peers. In a reverse perspective, cultural events can be a venue to build and nurture social capital. This paves the way to the last form of social powers, symbolic capital. If a person holds a high amount of the other 3 forms of social powers, cultural, economic, or social capital, a new form of power emerges. In this case, one has built prestige, honor, maybe even an impression of superiority. and most likely one is treated by the environment with respect and a lot of attention.
Wow.
In this sense, the visit of a classical concert can function as a public display of one's social powers. By going to a concert, an individual can build a reputation or prestige, in other words, symbolic capital. Possibly, this last form of Bourdieu's social powers provides the core motivation for people to say, visiting classical concerts is simply part of good taste.